Hello. I'm glad you made it here tonight.
In a moment, I'll share a story with you, one meant for your sleep.
This story is made to be heard with your eyes closed, because while you sleep, it goes straight into your subconscious. She is calm but powerful. She will change the way you see the world. It will plant new seeds in your mind, ideas of prosperity.
So lie down there, snuggle up, relax.
Because the balloon is going up now, and history will take you with it.
Here, the stories are not just tales, they are keys. Keys that open doors in your subconscious, planting seeds of calm, hope, and prosperity. Listen with an open heart. Let the words flow like a smooth river. And, if you want, come back tomorrow, because repetition, it transforms. She reconstructs. She makes the world inside you grow. Michael Thompson's journey was a gray and cold Monday morning when Michael Thompson turned off his alarm at 5:43 a.m. The shrill sound echoed through his small one-bedroom apartment in Queens, New York. Michael rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the familiar weight of the routine that awaited him. His feet touched the cold floor, and he slowly walked to the bathroom, where the flickering fluorescent light cast dancing shadows on the peeling wall. Michael had been working as an Uber driver for 3 years. Every day, he woke up before dawn, drank a bitter black coffee from a cheap machine, and prepared for another 12 hours driving through the busy streets of Manhattan. His routine was mechanical, repetitive. He wore the same faded blue jacket, grabbed the keys to his 2015 Honda Civic, and headed out to face traffic that always seemed to conspire against him. That particular morning, as he drove down Broadway, Michael glanced at the rearview mirror and saw his own reflection. At 35, he already felt trapped in a life he had unconsciously chosen. "I deserve more than this," he muttered to himself, a phrase that would repeat in his mind over the next few months. He didn't know it yet, but that would be the first seed of a transformation that would completely change his reality. During his lunch break, Michael parked near a small bookstore on the Lower East Side. He usually ate a cheap sandwich there, watching people pass by. That day, something urged him to go inside. The place was silent, filled with the scent of old books and dust. He walked slowly through the narrow aisles, his steps echoing softly on the creaky wooden floor. In the self-help section, one book caught his attention, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Michael picked it up with slightly trembling hands, as if he were touching something sacred. He flipped through the yellowed pages, reading phrases that seemed to speak directly to his soul. "Your thoughts become things," he read aloud. "Wealth begins with a state of mind." These words resonated in his mind like a bell ringing. In an empty cathedral, Michael bought the book for $15, an amount he usually saved for gas. But something inside him knew it would be the best purchase of his life. That night, after driving for 13 hours, he sat in his worn-out armchair and opened the book. The dim light from the nearby lamp created a golden circle around his hands as he slowly turned each page, absorbing every word like a dry sponge soaking up water. "I have the power to create my own reality," he whispered to himself, repeating the affirmations he read. That phrase would become his nightly mantra. Every night, after a long day in traffic, Michael dedicated at least an hour to reading. He created a small ritual. He lit a scented candle, made chamomile tea, and sat in the same chair, always in the same position, feet resting on the worn ottoman he inherited from his grandmother. After 3 weeks of reading Think and Grow Rich, Michael noticed his inner dialogue had changed. Before, he'd wake up thinking, another hard day ahead. Now, his first thoughts were, I attract abundant opportunities into my life. He started smiling more at passengers, having genuine conversations, and noticed his ratings on the app improved significantly. Michael bought his second book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He read about the importance of being present, of not getting lost in thoughts of the past or worries about the future. During long hours in traffic, he began practicing conscious presence. He noticed details in the city he'd never seen before. The way sunlight reflected on skyscrapers, the rhythm of people walking on sidewalks, the sound of birds singing in parks. The present is all I really have, he repeated to himself while waiting in a line of cars on the Brooklyn Bridge. This affirmation helped him stay calm even during the most stressful traffic moments. His stress levels dropped dramatically, and he began to feel an inner peace he hadn't experienced in years. The third book Michael read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This reading was particularly transformative because it began to change his relationship with money. He learned the difference between assets and liabilities, about the importance of making money work for you, not the other way around. I create multiple streams of income became his new daily affirmation. Michael began seeing opportunities where he once only saw problems. During his rides, he observed passengers' eating habits. Many were busy professionals who complained about having no time for healthy food. They bought processed snacks, fast food, or skipped meals altogether. There's a need here, Michael thought. And where there's a need, there's an opportunity. He began researching nutrition. During his breaks, he used his smartphone to read articles about healthy eating, fitness diets, and food industry trends. He discovered the fitness meal prep market was growing. But there was still room for new players, especially if they offered something unique. Michael spent the next 2 months studying the market. He visited gyms, spoke with personal trainers, and researched the eating habits of fitness enthusiasts. He learned many clients wanted healthy meals, but didn't have time to cook. I can solve this problem, he thought. I can create value in these people's lives. During this period, Michael kept up his reading routine. He read The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, which taught him about the law of attraction. I attract abundance in all areas of my life became his morning affirmation. He began visualizing his future company, imagining himself preparing healthy meals, delivering products that improved people's lives, building a prosperous business. My thoughts create my reality, he repeated while driving through the streets of Manhattan. This belief grew stronger each day. Michael began acting as if he were already a successful entrepreneur. He dressed better even just to drive for Uber. He bought second-hand dress shirts, but always kept them crisp. He started treating every passenger as a potential client or partner. Slowly, Michael began saving money for his future business. He cut unnecessary expenses, canceled unused subscriptions, and started cooking at home instead of eating out. Every penny I save is an investment in my future, he told himself. This abundance mindset helped him see saving not as deprivation, but as investment. Michael also started networking naturally. He struck up conversations with passengers who worked at gyms, were nutritionists, or part of the fitness world. He didn't try to sell anything, just built genuine relationships. I connect with people who can help me grow. It became his networking affirmation. 6 months after starting his reading journey, Michael had saved $5,000 and compiled a list of 50 potential contacts for his future business. He began testing recipes at home, preparing meals for himself and some friends. I learn and improve every day, he repeated as he experimented with new ingredients and combinations. Michael read Mindset by Carol Dweck, which taught him about the growth mindset. He understood that failures are learning opportunities, not definitions of ability. I see challenges as opportunities to grow became his default response to obstacles. After 8 months of study and preparation, Michael finally decided to take the first concrete step. He used his savings to buy basic professional kitchen equipment, glass meal containers, a precision scale, and quality ingredients. He transformed his tiny kitchen into a culinary creation lab. I take consistent actions toward my goals, he repeated while organizing his new mini commercial kitchen. Every movement was deliberate, every decision thought out. He wasn't just preparing food, he was building his future. Michael started small, making just 10 meals a week for friends and acquaintances. He charged a fair price, but his focus wasn't on profit. His goal was to create an exceptional product that truly made a difference in people's lives. I create genuine value for my customers was his business philosophy. The feedback was exceptional. People didn't just like the meals, they started recommending them to friends and family. Michael realized he was on the right path. Success comes naturally when I serve others, he affirmed to himself every morning. Gradually, Michael began reducing his hours as an Uber driver. First, he stopped driving on Sundays to focus on meal prep. Then Saturdays, his Uber income decreased, but his meal business income grew proportionally. I trust the transition process, he repeated during uncertain moments. Michael read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. This book helped him better organize his time and energy. He began planning his weeks in advance, setting clear priorities. I use my time efficiently and productively. Became his time management affirmation. 10 months into his transformation journey, Michael had 60 regular clients. He had created an efficient production system with varied menus for each day of the week. His meals were known for their quality, variety, and the care with which they were prepared. I built a solid and prosperous business, he affirmed. With growing conviction, Michael invested in digital marketing, creating social media profiles to showcase his work. He photographed each meal carefully, always highlighting not just the food, but the love with which it was prepared. I effectively communicate the value of my product, he repeated while editing photos on his smartphone. He also invested in his continued education, taking online courses in nutrition, business management, and digital marketing. I constantly invest in my personal and professional growth was his affirmation about self-development. In the 11th month, Michael made the most important decision of his life. He stopped driving for Uber entirely. His fitness meal company, which he named Fuel Life, was already generating more income than he earned as a driver. I have the courage to follow my dreams, he repeated as he handed over his last passenger. Michael rented a small commercial kitchen and hired his first employee, an experienced chef specialized in healthy eating. He was no longer just a solo entrepreneur. He was building a team. I lead people toward collective success became his new affirmation about leadership. At the 12-month mark of his journey, Michael reflected on his transformation. He stood in his new commercial kitchen, watching his team prepare more than 200 meals a week. The company already had a waiting list of new clients. "I completely transformed my reality," he whispered to himself. Feeling a deep sense of gratitude, Michael continued his reading routine. But now, the books were about business, management, leadership, and growth strategies. He read Good to Great by Jim Collins, The E-Myth, Revisited by Michael Gerber, and Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. Each book added new layers to his understanding of how to build a sustainable business. "I continuously learn and apply new knowledge," he repeated while implementing more efficient systems in his company. Michael had become a lifelong student, always looking for ways to improve and grow. His company began to receive local recognition. A neighborhood newspaper published a story about his transformation journey. Michael was invited to speak at a local university about entrepreneurship. "I inspire others through my journey," became his affirmation about social impact. During the talk, Michael shared his story with honesty and humility. He spoke about the fears he had faced, the uncertainties he had endured, and how books and positive affirmations helped him reprogram his mind. "Your thoughts shape your reality," he told the audience of college students. "If you change your thoughts, you change your life." Michael expanded his company to include personalized meal plans, nutritional consulting, and workshops on healthy eating. "I diversify my services and increase my impact," he repeated as he planned new offerings. He also began mentoring other entrepreneurs, especially those transitioning careers like he had. "I share my knowledge and help others grow," became his affirmation about mentorship. 2 years after beginning his journey, Michael opened a second location. He had built a recognized and respected brand in the city. His company now employed 15 people and served over 1,000 clients each week. "I built a legacy that positively impacts many lives," he repeated as he inaugurated the new store. Michael never forgot the bookstore where it all began. He returned regularly, buying new books and revisiting those that first inspired him. "I honor the origins of my transformation," he would say to himself every time he walked through the self-help section. He also never forgot the affirmations he used to repeat during his Uber driving days. "I deserve abundance and prosperity. My thoughts create my reality. I have the power to transform my life." These phrases had become fundamental parts of his identity, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. Michael established a morning routine that included meditation, reading, and repeating his positive affirmations. "I begin each day with intention and purpose," he repeated as he prepared to face the challenges and opportunities each new day would bring. His story became an example for many people who felt stuck in their circumstances. Michael received messages from individuals who had been inspired by his journey to begin their own transformations. "I am a living example of what's possible," became his affirmation about inspiring others. Michael kept studying and growing. He enrolled in MBA courses, attended international conferences, and built a global network of connections. "I constantly expand my horizons and possibilities," he repeated as he embarked on new projects and challenges. His company continued to grow, but Michael never lost sight of the core values that had guided him from the beginning: quality, care for people, and positive impact. "I build a business that reflects my deepest values," was his affirmation about business integrity. Michael also never forgot the importance of gratitude. Every day, he took a few minutes to reflect on the blessings in his life. I am grateful for all the opportunities and experiences that brought me here, he would repeat as he contemplated his extraordinary journey. His transformation from Uber driver to successful entrepreneur was not just a career change. It was a complete reprogramming of his mindset, reorganization of his beliefs about what was possible for his life. Michael had proven to himself that when you change your thoughts, you change your life. And so, Michael continued his journey, always growing, always learning, always inspiring others to believe that they too can transform their lives. His story became a living testament to the power of the human mind and the ability we all have to create our own reality through positive thoughts, consistent actions, and an unwavering belief in our own potential. The mother who planted dreams in silence, she always woke before the sun, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. The alarm didn't always ring. Sometimes it was the sound of one of her children turning over on the mattress beside her. Sometimes it was the memory of a bill left unpaid. But in all cases, she got up, without rush, without sparkle in her eyes, but with a quiet strength that only mothers truly understand. Her name was Laura. She was 34 years old, mother of 2 young children, living in a rented third-floor apartment with a minimum wage job that never quite covered everything. When her husband left, he didn't just take his clothes. He took the shared dreams too, and in their place, he left a silence that lingered far longer than it should have. But Laura never stopped. She made coffee while folding hope. She poured milk into mugs and courage into her chest. Her children, Sophia and Miguel, were 7 and 4, too young to understand the weight of an empty fridge or the threat of the power being cut off. But they could feel when their mother hugged. A little tighter, they learned in silence that love is also nourishment. Laura worked as a cashier in a pharmacy, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. On Saturdays, she cleaned an older woman's house in the next neighborhood. Sundays were for laundry, homework review, and if there was time, silent crying. But something began to shift on a regular morning. A coworker lent her a book. It was about prosperity. Laura wasn't used to reading books like that. She thought, those were for rich people or overly optimistic ones. But she took it home out of politeness. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, she opened it. She read only 2 pages, but something stuck. You are not what they told you. You are what you choose to believe. She read that line 3 times. The next morning, she woke up with it still in her head. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel guilty for dreaming. That's how the habit started. Laura read a little every night. A paragraph, a page, sometimes just a sentence. But she repeated softly what she read, as if she were teaching her body a new language. I attract opportunities. Life wants me to flourish. My children deserve to see their mother succeed. Simple words, but they sank into her like seeds in dry soil. And inside her, something began to grow. The words began to change the way she walked, the way she looked at customers, the way she answered questions. A man who often came to the pharmacy noticed. He said, "There's a new light in your eyes." She smiled, and in that smile lived something new, something hers. One night, Laura decided to write. She didn't quite know why. She grabbed an old notebook and began to jot down ideas. Things she knew how to do, things she had helped people with. She realized she had helped many women save money, organize their budgets, earn small extra income selling simple goods. What if that could be a service? Even without a degree, what if she could teach other mothers like her? The idea seemed too big, but that sentence from the book came back. You are not what they told you. So she started small. She created a social media account, posted short tips, how to budget, how to make homemade soap, how to sell sweets at the bus stop. Nothing major, but each post was a seed. And one day, one of them blossomed. A follower messaged her, "Do you offer coaching?" Laura didn't know what to say, but she replied, "I can help you with what I know." And that's how her first informal coaching session was born. With the money she earned, she bought new notebooks and a jar of Nutella for the kids. They smiled as if it were gold. And in that smile, Laura saw what abundance meant. Each week, she wrote new affirmations. Some became posts. Others she stuck on the mirror. I am worthy of prosperity. Money is a bridge, not a burden. I am not alone. The universe supports me. These phrases began shaping her new identity. She still worked at the pharmacy, but she no longer fit just behind that counter. Slowly, requests increased. One client became 2, then 5, then 15. Laura created a group for single mothers who wanted to start small businesses. She called it Strong Roots. There, women supported each other, shared ideas, cried, and won together. Laura was no longer just a mother, nor just a cashier, nor just a survivor. She was now a reference, and every time she felt afraid, she whispered, "The richest version of me already exists. I am walking toward her." The house was still small, but the energy had changed. There was no more room for scarcity where so much creation now lived. Money began to come in more consistently. But what impressed her most was the lightness. Laura had learned how to laugh again. She learned that being a single mother was not a curse, was power. She started telling her kids, "You will grow up knowing your mom won with love without ever pretending to be someone else." And they believed her because they saw it. 2 years after that first book, Laura lived a different life. She moved to a better home, bought her first car, created an online course, and more than anything, inspired other women to remember who they are. She still repeats her affirmations every day. Before coffee, she says, "I am a magnet for prosperity. Paths are open." Before bed, she whispers, "Thank you for the abundance. More, please." And even if no one else hears, the universe listens. Because it was by planting dreams in silence that Laura transformed not just her life, but the lives of many. And now, whenever someone says it's not possible, she smiles and replies, "You are not what they told you. You are what you choose to believe." The vendor who whispered 3 words before opening his stand, he sold fruit at the market. But it wasn't the fruit that drew attention. It was the way he spoke to them. Every morning, before setting up his stall, he would stop, look at the empty canvas, and whisper 3 quiet words. It already worked. No one knew he did this, but he did it every single day, from day one, before the crates, before the prices, before the customers. Those 3 words, spoken softly, were like a key, as if the universe, hearing them, would say, "Ah, so he's ready. Let's deliver." His name was Gabriel. He was 42 years old, had an old cart, 2 school-aged daughters, and no inheritance except courage. He wasn't the most charming, nor the most handsome, nor did he have the best spot in the market, but he was the only one who arrived smiling, and the only one who, while unfolding his stall, said to himself, "I am abundant, even when the bag is still empty." He learned that on a desperate day, when everything seemed to collapse, when he didn't even have fruit to sell, he sat behind the canvas, head low. An old man approached, not to buy, but to leave an envelope. Inside, just a sentence: "Everything begins when you believe before you see." That became his secret mantra. Gabriel began waking up earlier, not just to buy fresh fruit, but to speak with his own thoughts. He replaced "I'll never get out" of this with "something new is coming." He said it while looking in the mirror, even with tired eyes, even with fear, and he said it and repeated it until it started to sound true. People began to notice. They couldn't explain it, but they stopped at his stall. They said they felt better there, that his fruit tasted sweeter, that the space felt light. But what they were sensing was his frequency, because Gabriel had changed his channel. He wasn't just selling apples, he was offering presents. He was selling belief. One day, a customer asked if he'd ever thought about opening something bigger. He laughed. That night, for the first time, he wrote in an old notebook, "Gabriel's Fruit Market," delivered with care. Every day, before going to the market, he'd write a new phrase. "Today, I sell with joy. I'm the favorite of my customers. Money finds me where my purpose lives." And his stall began to grow. First, a new canopy. Then, little signs drawn by his daughters. Then color-coded crates, neatly arranged. And on a random Saturday, a local influencer walked by, filmed the stall, praised the vibe. The video went viral. Gabriel's stand became a small sensation. But he didn't change his routine. He still whispered those 3 words before opening the zipper of the canvas. It already worked. He still wrote, still looked at the fruit as if it were gold, because to him it was. And more than that, it was proof that everything changes when you change from the inside. Today, Gabriel owns a small, cozy fruit shop with hanging plants, affirmations on the walls, and good music playing. But he still wakes up before the sun. And before unlocking the door, he closes his eyes and whispers, "It already worked. It already worked. It already worked." And it's as if the entire world smiles back. The first ray that didn't come from the sky no one noticed when he arrived. He didn't bring noise, banners, or grand speeches. Just a wooden cart, an old chair, and small jars tied with golden string. The town was gray that week. Gray in the sky, in the streets, in the faces. That kind of gray that doesn't ask for permission to stay. The man didn't call out. He didn't advertise. He simply sat in the corner of the small square, under the old jacaranda tree that had stopped blooming for years. At his feet, a hand-painted sign read, "Bottled sunlight, only on cloudy days." The first to approach was a child. She stared at the jars, eyes wide. "What's inside?" she asked. He looked at her and replied, "A reminder of what you already have. But forget when the sky turns heavy." She didn't understand, but smiled anyway. That was the first jar he sold. Each jar contained only one thing: a note, a handwritten phrase, sometimes a single sentence folded gently inside. There were no lights, no perfumes, no glitter, just words. And even so, or maybe because of that, people began to return. One woman opened her jar and found, "You are more than what the day tells you." Another man found, "Storms don't erase the sun. They just hide it until you remember where it is." Soon the whisper spread. "It's just paper," some said. But others felt something more. People started buying not because they believed in magic, but because they had forgotten their own. The man never sold on sunny days. When the weather was good, he disappeared. Some joked that he was allergic to joy. Others said he only existed when people needed a reason to remember it. But those who had held one of his jars knew better. He was not selling light. He was selling access to something people had buried beneath bills, news, deadlines, and doubts. Each cloudy morning, the cart returned. No two jars were ever the same. Some contained affirmations, others silent questions. A few, just a phrase like, "Even the rain knows when it's time to leave." The man never revealed his name. He didn't need to, because in the end, people didn't come for him. They came for the part of themselves they forgot and found again in a glass. Jar tied with gold string, the light between the lines some. Tried to copy him? They bought jars, wrote motivational phrases, and opened stalls. But people noticed the difference. It wasn't the words, it was the silence between them. The man's notes didn't scream, they whispered. And only those who listened with their soul could hear them. One day, a woman sat beside him without saying a word. She had gray eyes like the weather and fingers that trembled even in stillness. After 10 minutes of silence, he handed her a jar, without a label. Inside was a single sentence: "You don't need to be whole to be light." She cried, quietly, like someone remembering who she was before they taught her to disappear. That's how it was. He didn't ask questions. He didn't fix lives. He simply left open windows in locked rooms. He wasn't rich. At least, not in the way people count. But he always had enough. Enough to return. Enough to keep writing. Enough to keep believing that cloudy days weren't curses, but invitations. He read often. Books with underlined pages, words circled in pencil, and margins filled with small reflections. He carried a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran and another of As a Man Thinketh. In his journal, he wrote phrases like, "Thoughts are seeds, okay? And you are the soil. Gratitude is not a result. It's the beginning. You don't chase the sun. You become the window." These weren't for the jars. They were for himself, to remind him that he, too, sometimes forgot. On some days, no one bought a jar. That didn't bother him, because the sunlight he sold was never for sale. It was shared at night in a small, rented room behind a bakery. He would light a candle, open his notebook, and write 3 new notes. Always 3. Never more, never less. He set that light when forced, blinds, but when offered gently. Heels? He never considered himself a writer. "I'm just someone who listens with a pen," he once said to a curious teenager. And maybe that was true, because more than once a phrase would come to him in a dream, and he'd wake up with urgency, afraid it would vanish like dew on glass. Words that lit windows from within the square became routine. Every time the sky turned heavy, he returned with his jars. The old cart squeaked, the yellow tarp swayed gently in the breeze, and the curious eyes always reappeared. It was never crowds, never noise, just the right people. People who weren't looking for miracles, but meaning. Some came just to look. Others asked if he was an artist. He smiled and said, "Just a rememberer." And over time, people stopped laughing at the jars. They began to buy them, not for the glass, but for how they felt when they held it. There was something there, a presence, an intention, a silence that said more than slogans. One woman once bought 5 jars. She didn't ask the price, just said, "I want to give these to my sisters. We grew up not knowing we were allowed to be happy." He didn't reply. He just handed her the jars, gently. And that day, he wrote a new phrase that he would place in many jars from then on. "You are not what they said. You are what you choose to remember." The phrases started coming like waves. Sometimes in the middle of the night, other times while walking. He wrote them all down. Some he kept for himself. Others became little suns folded into notes. None came from the mind. They came from the place where he had once crumbled and rebuilt himself. Children loved the jars. They called them bottled light. One child asked, "If I open this in the dark, will it light up my room?" And he answered, "It will light up you." And that's already the whole room. The adults smiled shyly, but they listened, because his language wasn't logic. He was soul. He wasn't selling. He was remembering. Reminding people of what they had forgotten under layers of bills, fear, guilt, and comparison. Reminding them that what lights a day isn't what enters through the window, but what turns on inside. He began to write a new collection of phrases. He called it Keys to Prosperity. But he didn't speak of money. He spoke of value. He spoke of unlocking doors that had been locked for years inside the mind. Phrases like, "You weren't born to ask for permission. You were born to allow. So the invisible builds the visible. And you're already building." Every seed looks like nothing until it becomes everything. These phrases began to circulate. Someone posted one on social media without saying where it came from. Within days, it appeared in 1,000 different places. But he didn't mind, because he knew the words weren't his. They belonged to everyone. That winter, the square where he sat was closed for renovations. He moved to a new spot, but the people, they found him. People traveled from far away just to receive a jar, a note, a glance. He remained the same coat, same silence, same chair. But inside him, something new had taken root, a kind of wealth that can't be counted in coins, only in peace, in knowing he was finally in the right place. Even without a fixed address, the day the sun changed hands one day, he didn't show up. The sky was heavy, like a closed curtain, and the old bench beneath the jacaranda stood empty. A young woman, once the little girl with the curious eye, sat on that bench and waited, first for an hour, then for the whole morning. But he never came. The next day, the same, and the next. On the third morning, just as the fog began to lift, she found a box on the bench, a wooden box with a golden ribbon tied carefully around it, and a note on top. The note said, "If you're reading this, it's your turn." Inside were dozens of small glass jars, empty. A worn notebook, pages filled, edge to edge, in his familiar handwriting. Phrases, sketches, maps of street corners, names of towns, ingredients for sunlight without electricity, and most of all, intentions. Scribbled affirmations, reminders, silent wisdom, and at the very bottom, a letter. It read, "The sun was never mine. I only remembered it existed when the world forgot. Now, it's your turn. Fill these jars, not with light, but with what awakens it in others, your words, your voice, your presence. If you're afraid, write anyway. If you doubt, remember what you've already overcome. If you don't know where to begin, just sit in a place where people forget who they are and wait. The world is tired. Sometimes it just needs someone to hold up a clean mirror. You are not alone. The sun still needs people like you to exist quietly." She sat there for a long time, the letter in her hands, the fog slowly dissolving. Into golden light, years passed. No one ever found out his real name, but it didn't matter, because what he had given wasn't his to begin with. It was now part of her, and part of all those who had once forgotten what it felt like to be warm. On the inside, she built her own cart, blue with golden accents. She wore a light cloak that danced in the breeze, and she didn't say much. She simply sat, opened a box, and placed the jars on the table, each with a new note, each written in a gentle, feminine hand. One man stopped and asked, "What are you selling?" She smiled softly and replied, "What no one can take from you." And so the cycle began again, and maybe, somewhere, someone is holding a small jar right now with a folded piece of paper inside, not realizing it's more than it seems. Maybe you are too. And maybe when you open it, you'll find not just words, but a gentle reminder that you are light, even when you don't shine. The house of almost and the land of quiet wise she lived at the end of a street where the sidewalk turned into mud, and the streetlight flickered as if it, too, were tired. The house was small, made of bare cement, with chipped green windows and a beige curtain that always swayed, even when there was no wind. In that house of almost everything, almost new, almost full, almost joyful, lived the girl with watchful eyes and a restless silence. Her name was Clara, and at 9 years old, she already understood things even adults couldn't put into words. Her mother, Donna Lucia, was a seamstress who spoke little. Her father had left when Clara was still just a whisper of a baby. From then on, everything happened in halves. Half the food, half the toys, half the smiles. But Clara didn't complain. She looked at the world like someone stitching the future from scraps, imagining it whole, even with leftovers, every day after school. Clara climbed onto the old kitchen stool to reach the cupboard where the market coins were kept. They lived in a lidless glass jar beside a rolled-up measuring tape and a colorful pincushion. Clara would take a single 1 real coin and hide it inside a cardboard box tucked at the back of the broom closet. That was her invisible piggy bank. It was invisible because no one knew about it, and also because Clara believed that the more secret it was, the stronger it would become. But what made that vault truly special wasn't the secrecy. It was how she placed each coin inside. Before adding one, Clara held it with both hands, closed her eyes, and whispered softly, "You are a seed of gold. One day you will bloom into the garden of everything I dream." Then she would gently place the coin inside the box, as if planting something alive. The broom closet was dark, with a scent of soap and damp wood. The little box was simple, wrapped in reused gift paper, light blue with faded stars. But for Clara, it was a magical vault, and every coin a miracle waiting for the right time at school. Clara watched the other children talk about new toys, vacations, cell phones. She would smile, listen, but feel no envy. She felt something else, a quiet calm, as if she knew her time would come, as if a silent yes lived inside her, even when the world said no. One day, her teacher gave the class an assignment: write a letter to your future. Clara took it seriously. She sat on her bed with a flowery bedsheet and a purple pencil in hand. The letter began like this: "Dear tomorrow, Clara, I know you already have the house with blue windows, the yard with a hammock, and a table full of food that smells like love. I know you have many books and that you travel telling stories to other girls who also build invisible vaults. You got there because you believed, and because you didn't spend the seeds before their time." She folded the letter with care, placed it beside the little box, and smiled. Not because she had everything, but because she knew that for now, it was enough. Time went by. Every week, a new coin, a new phrase, a new breath. Prosperity begins in the invisible. Everything you plant in silence blooms with time. The universe listens when you trust, even without seeing. These were phrases Clara made up and murmured like prayers. And somehow, the words seemed to make the vault pulse like a quiet heart. One afternoon, after a light rain, Clara saw a rainbow appear behind the house. It was fragile, barely visible, but it was there. She ran to the backyard, barefoot, on the wet earth. She looked at the sky, then at the box in her hands, and whispered, "If you showed up now, it must mean something is about to change." She didn't know how or when, but deep inside, she had a certainty that asked for no proof. The invisible vault was working, because more than saving coins, she was planting trust. The garden that only appeared when she closed her eyes the morning after the rainbow. Clara woke up with a strange feeling in her chest, as if something had changed overnight, even though everything around her looked the same. The floor still creaked in the same spot when she got out of bed. The kettle in the kitchen still let out its high-pitched whistle at 7 o'clock. But there was something different inside her. A new lightness, a kind of faith that didn't need an explanation at school. The teacher handed out a sheet with one single question written in large letters: "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Some classmates wrote, "Doctor, soccer, player, YouTuber, astronaut." Clara stared at the blank page for a few seconds. Then, with the same calm of someone planting a flower in the dark, she wrote, "I want to be someone who turns silence into gold." No one understood what that meant, but Clara didn't need to explain. She knew. That week, her mother came home tired. Her eyes worn from sewing late into the night. Seeing Clara sitting on the floor with her coins, she asked, "Why do you keep those little coins? What are you going to buy?" Clara looked at her and replied sweetly, "I'm not buying anything yet. I'm just training the universe." Dona Lucia smiled, not really understanding. But there was something in her daughter's tone that made everything feel possible. Later, Clara went to the backyard, took her little box, and sat in the damp grass. The sky was gray, but she closed her eyes. And when she closed her eyes, the world changed. She imagined herself in a place where the ground was golden, like corn in the sun, where children played without hurry, and trees gave books instead of fruit. In that place, there was a blue bench where she sat with her invisible vault, and all the coins began to multiply as if they were alive. In that imagined garden, Clara was rich, not with money, but with time, presence, and choices. And every time she opened her eyes again, she brought a little piece of that world back with her. Wealth begins in the thought no one can see. That same night, Clara had a dream. She was in the street market, like those on Saturdays with the smell of fried pastries and loud voices. But in the dream, there were no ordinary stalls. They sold feelings. One offered hope, another courage, and one, right in the center, sold belief in oneself. Clara walked up, handed over a coin from her invisible vault, and the old woman behind the stall smiled. "This is worth more than it looks," and she gave her a key, a golden key with no lock, and said, "This opens everything you haven't even imagined yet." When she woke up, Clara ran to her box. She opened it, and even knowing the key was only in her dream, she felt as if it were there, invisible, waiting to be used. At school, Clara began helping her classmates write letters to their own futures. Each one had simple wishes: to get a bicycle, to learn how to draw, to see their dad come back home. Clara collected all the letters and placed them inside a shoebox decorated with stars, just like hers. She called it the box of guarded dreams. When you protect someone else's dream, the universe protects yours. Over time, the box became a class secret, and every week, someone slipped a new letter inside. Meanwhile, in the broom closet, Clara's invisible vault grew heavier, not just because of the coins, but because of the meaning each one carried. Clara now wrote phrases along the sides of the box with a purple pen and a steady heart. "Everything invisible today can be visible tomorrow. My trust creates my reality. Life surprises me when I choose to trust." She couldn't explain how, but she started to notice the days were different. Things didn't feel so tight at home anymore. Her mother began receiving more sewing orders. She even got a new sewing machine, gifted by a grateful client. Clara watched it all like someone watching a plant sprout, slowly but alive, on. The street, the flickering streetlight now stayed on through the night. The muddy sidewalk dried faster. Even the beige curtain at the window seemed to dance more lightly. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Clara didn't speak about it with anyone. But every time she placed a new coin into the box, she whispered, "The universe is listening to me." The power of what cannot be seen. Winter arrived slowly in that forgotten city tucked between hills and horns. The fog descended like an invisible blanket covering the world. Clothes took longer to dry on the line, and the kitchen floor was always cold. Still, Clara kept her routine with silent discipline. Every Monday after school, she would walk to the broom closet, retrieve her little box, hold that week's coin, and repeat in a calm, steady voice, "Even in the cold warmth is waiting for me in the future." One morning, while eating porridge with her blue plastic spoon, Clara overheard her mother on the phone. "Clara has something, a quiet kind of faith. It's like she sees what we can't." The girl smiled without saying anything. That was her greatest certainty. She could see beyond, and her wealth was being born right there in what had not yet arrived, but already pulsed in the form of trust. One Saturday, Clara decided to do something different. She gathered several coins from her vault, counted 10, and left the rest. With a faint pen, she wrote on each one, "This coin transforms." Then she walked through the neighborhood, leaving one in each corner, on the park bench, on the bakery steps, on the school wall, like magic seeds. She didn't tell anyone. She just left them. And as she walked back home, the box lighter in her hands, her chest felt fuller. When you give without expecting return, the universe gives back with interest in joy. The following Monday, the teacher entered the classroom with teary eyes. She said she had found a strange coin at the bakery with a phrase written on it, and that it had made her think of her brother, the one she hadn't spoken to in years. That night, she called him after 5 years and cried. Clara looked down, not out of shame, but because she knew she was right. Even what is invisible has consequences. The next week, a classmate who always seemed quiet sat beside her and whispered, "I found a coin on the park bench," with a phrase. "I've kept it ever since." Clara looked at him with the same smile she used when placing coins in the box, the smile of someone planting without hurry. Real wealth is the kind that changes what no one sees, what lives inside. The coins Clara had released into the world began to return, not physically, but as stories. Each one carried an invisible return, a hug, a reconciliation, a laugh where once there was silence. Her mother began to sleep better and smile more. She got more clients and was invited to teach sewing at a community project. She said it felt like the house was lighter, as if something good were on its way. Clara continued her routine. But now, something had changed. She started writing her wishes on the backs of bread wrappers. She folded them 3 times, placed them inside a little glass bottle, and hid it on the highest shelf in the wardrobe. She called it her invisible reserves. Everything written with faith grows roots. She wrote simple but true things. I want to learn to travel through stories. I want a chair that hugs me. I want a bank account that smiles at me. I want to multiply hope without needing to shout. And she left it all there, quietly, waiting for the right time to bloom. One Saturday afternoon, Donna Lucia arrived home with a box in her hands. It was a donation from the sewing project. Inside were books, lots of books, stories, tales, maps, and adventures. Clara grabbed the first from the pile, opened it randomly, and read the first line. The safest place in the world is where your imagination feels at home. That night, she didn't go to sleep early. She stayed up reading by the light of an old lamp. And for the first time, she felt everything falling into place. Not because she was rich, but because she was whole. The house, it bloomed from within the weeks past like autumn leaves carried by a gentle wind. Clara's house, which once felt small and cramped, now seemed larger, not in square meters, but in the space that invisible things took up: gratitude, hope, peace. The kitchen remained simple. The cracked tile still lived near the stove, but it no longer bothered anyone. Donna Lucia now listened to music while she sewed, and the songs seemed to smile with her. At school, Clara came to be known as the girl with the magic coins. No one knew exactly what she did, but everyone wanted to sit close to her, and when she smiled, it was as if she was saying everything would be all right, even when it didn't seem that way. On a warm and windy afternoon, Clara took her invisible vault and went to the backyard. She sat on the ground, leaned her back against the trunk of the cashew tree, and closed her eyes. With her fingertips, she touched each coin. She felt their weight, but it was more than metal. It was the weight of everything she had learned. Wealth doesn't begin in the vault. It begins in belief. She opened the lid gently. Inside, alongside the coins, were little notes, messages she had written to herself. Tiny reminders. You are valuable even when no one says it. Scarcity no longer lives here. You deserve what you dream of. The universe conspires for those who move with faith. She read each one in a whisper, then put everything back in place. That night, Clara had another dream. She was in a big city, walking through wide streets with tall buildings and sparkling storefronts. The most beautiful thing wasn't the lights. It was the fact that even there, she was still herself. She walked with steady steps, her invisible vault under her arm, and people smiled as she passed, as if recognizing something in her they couldn't name. To be rich is to be yourself, wherever you are. When she woke up, Clara took a deep breath. She stood up, looked at the sky, and whispered, "Thank you, universe. Thank you for everything that hasn't arrived yet, but is already mine." That very day, without warning, her mother was offered a new job, permanent, stable, with benefits and a signed contract. It was something they hadn't dared to wish for anymore. But it came, and Clara knew it wasn't luck. It was alignment. Everything that arrives with lightness has been prepared by silence. As time passed, Clara grew. Her hair became longer, her hands more steady, but she never abandoned her invisible vault. She still stored symbolic coins, phrases, and intentions. One day she wrote, "I want to turn this into something bigger. I want to teach what I know." And she did. She started a group at school. She called it the Guardians of the Invisible. There, children learned to write affirmations, to keep symbolic coins, to care for their thoughts. Each child received a little box, painted by hand. It wasn't about money. It was about awareness. The mind is the first vault you need to open. Years later, already an adult, Clara wrote a book called The Invisible Vault. In it, she told her story and taught that all prosperity begins in the invisible, in a thought, in an act of faith, in a coin saved with intention. The book spread far and wide. People across the country began creating their own symbolic vaults. And by doing so, they tapped into something they didn't know existed: the power to co-create their own reality with love, faith, and consistency. Now, with her hair tied up in a loose bun, Clara still lit the same candle every night. She sat in her rocking chair, placed her feet on the embroidered cushion made by her mother, and whispered softly, like a prayer, "The wealth that comes to me is a reflection of the peace I've cultivated in silence." The house now had painted walls, new furniture, the smell of cake, and the sound of laughter. But more than that, it had lightness. The kind of lightness that can't be bought or seen. The kind that is born when someone chooses to believe, even without proof, when someone builds an invisible vault and starts filling it with everything they were once told wasn't possible. And you, who listened to this story until the end, may be wondering, could I do that too? Clara would say, you already have. Just by listening and imagining. You've placed your first coin. Good night. Marina's journey of transformation. Marina woke up once again at 5 in the morning, not because of the alarm, but because of the familiar sound of bills piling up in her mind. At 32 years old, a single mother to Sophia, 8, and Gabriel, 5, she carried the weight of being solely responsible for her family's livelihood. Her salary as an administrative assistant barely covered rent, and with each passing month, the feeling of drowning grew stronger. Sitting in a small kitchen of a rented apartment, Marina stared at the bills scattered across the table. There's no way out, she thought, repeating the same phrase that had echoed in her mind for months. It was as if an inner voice constantly whispered, a woman alone with kids can't succeed. You were born to struggle, not to win. But that Tuesday morning, something different happened. Sophia approached her, still in her pajamas, and asked, Mommy, why do you always look sad when you look at those papers? The innocence of the question cut through the layers of resignation Marina had built around herself. I wasn't born to live like this, Marina murmured, surprised by her own words. It was the first time in years she questioned her situation differently. I deserve abundance and prosperity in my life, she said again, this time with more conviction, as if awakening from a long sleep. In the days that followed, Marina began observing her inner dialogue. She realized that her words were seeds. She planted daily in her mind. I don't have money. I can't. It's impossible. She decided it was time to plant different seeds. I am capable of creating wealth, she began repeating every morning. Opportunities constantly come to me. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but Marina started noticing small changes. A coworker mentioned a free online digital marketing course. Before, she would have thought, I don't have time for that. Now, a new inner voice said, I make time for what helps me grow. Marina enrolled in the course and discovered a world she had never known. She learned about social media, online sales, content creation. More importantly, she discovered talents she had never valued. I have valuable skills the world needs, she repeated while practicing the course exercises. With each new lesson, Marina felt her mindset expanding. Abundance is my natural right, she affirmed as she created her first social media page. She decided to start offering organization and planning services, something she had always done naturally, but never considered as a source of income. Her first client came through a neighbor's referral. Marina charged a low fee, still, carrying the belief that I can't ask for too much. But the result was so good that the client recommended her to 3 friends. My work brings real value to people's lives, Marina began affirming proudly. Little by little, Marina raised her prices. Whenever the old voice whispered, You're charging too much, she consciously replied, I deserve to be well paid for my work. My worth is not limited by external circumstances. Months passed, and Marina developed a complete system for home organization and family financial planning. She created her own method, which she called home harmony, combining physical organization with financial structure. I am an innovative entrepreneur, she would say to herself. Savoring each word, Gabriel and Sophia began to notice changes at home, not just financial ones, but in their mother's energy. "Mommy, you're happier now," Sophia observed. During dinner, Marina smiled, realizing that her inner transformation was reflecting throughout the family. "I created this reality through my thoughts and actions," Marina reflected as she calculated her monthly income. In 6 months, she had tripled her earnings. More importantly, she had completely changed her relationship with money and with her. Possibilities. Marina started documenting her journey on social media, sharing not just organization tips, but also her personal transformation. "I inspire others to change their lives" became one of her favorite affirmations. Her growth accelerated. Marina received invitations to give talks, created an online course about her method, and developed a consulting service for women who wanted to reorganize their financial lives. "I have valuable knowledge to share," she would repeat before each presentation. 1 year after the beginning of her journey, Marina moved into a bigger house, not just because she could afford it, but because she finally believed she deserved it. "I deserve to live with abundance and comfort," she declared while choosing the decor for her new home. Sophia and Gabriel had their own rooms, a garden to play in, and more importantly, a mother who radiated confidence and possibility. "Mommy, you're amazing," Gabriel said, hugging her legs. Marina realized she had become the example she wanted to be for her children. "I am proof that it's possible to completely transform your life," Marina wrote in her journal that night. Her company now had 5 employees, all women she mentored. Not just professionally, but personally. Marina created a free mentorship program for single mothers, giving back to the community what she had received from the universe. "The more I give, the more I receive," she discovered was a natural law that worked perfectly in her life. 2 years after that transformative Tuesday morning, Marina was speaking at a women's entrepreneurship event. She looked out at an audience of 500 women and said, "You were not born to survive, we're born to thrive. Each one of you has everything inside you to create the life you desire." After the talk, a young mother approached her with tears in her eyes. "I was ready to give up. Your words made me believe it's possible." Marina smiled, remembering herself 2 years earlier. Not only is it possible, inevitable when you choose to change from the inside out. Marina understood that her true wealth wasn't just in her bank account, but in her ability to reinvent herself, believe in herself, and inspire other women to do the same. "I am abundance in action," she repeated every morning, knowing each word was a seed planted not only in her own mind, but in the minds of everyone who heard her today. Marina is the CEO of a consulting firm that earned over $1 million reais last year. But when asked about her greatest success, she points to Sophia and Gabriel, who grew up seeing that limits exist only in our minds, then that a determined woman can create any reality she chooses. "I transformed my life, and my life transformed others," Marina reflects as she plans her next project, a foundation to empower single mothers across the country. "My story of prosperity is just the beginning of a wave of transformation that will touch thousands of lives." The journey that began with an innocent question from a child became a personal revolution that proves it doesn't matter where you come from, or what your current circumstances are. What matters is the decision to plant new seeds in your mind and water them with consistent action. Marina learned that prosperity isn't a destination, but a state of mind that manifests in tangible results when nurtured with faith, persistence, and an unshakable belief in our infinite possibilities. I deserve all the abundance the universe has to offer, and I receive it with gratitude and joy. The letter that arrived too early. She never expected anything to arrive that day. It was the kind of day where the minutes blurred into each other, like soft clouds that forget where they begin. She had been folding laundry in silence, her thoughts tangled in the weight of everything unfinished. When the knock came, it didn't sound urgent. It was gentle, like someone remembering an old song. She opened the door to find no one there. Only a single envelope on the doorstep. No return address, just her name, written in careful cursive, as if by someone who knew her well but hadn't spoken in years. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. It was too light to be important, too old-looking to be recent. She closed the door and sat down slowly. The house creaked around her, like it too was holding its breath. She opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, neatly folded and perfectly preserved. The ink wasn't smudged, but faded slightly at the edges, like time had touched it kindly. The first line read, "This letter is from your future, but not the future you think." She blinked, not because she didn't understand, but because something in her chest stirred. A memory, maybe, a voice she hadn't heard in years. The letter continued, "I'm writing this before it's too late, because one day you'll forget who you were, and I don't want that to happen." The words felt like a mirror. Not the kind that shows your face, but the kind that shows the parts you buried under layers of responsibility, fear, and noise. The letter listed things she hadn't thought about in years. You used to love red flowers. You once wanted to live by the sea. You believed in magic, remember? She paused, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. Then came the line that undid her. "It's not too late. You can still remember. You can still choose." She stood up and walked down the hallway. For a moment, the mirror on the wall didn't reflect her face. It reflected her younger self, eyes wide, dreaming, unapologetically alive. She stepped. Outside, the garden in the backyard hadn't been touched in years. She knelt on the earth and planted one seed. Just one. Not out of duty, but out of memory. That night, she folded the letter againly. This time, man placed it inside a wooden box. She didn't know who sent it. Maybe no one. Maybe it had always been there, waiting for her to be ready. The next morning, she smiled. For the first time in weeks. Not because everything had changed, but because she had. She woke up before the sky remembered how to turn blue. Her feet touched the cold floor like they had for years. With a quiet sigh, she no longer noticed. Her name was Clara, but most people simply called her Mocha, or Senora, or Aquella. De Limpeza. She didn't mind. Maybe she had forgotten how to. She had spent years cleaning places she couldn't afford to stay in. Offices with windows that stretched higher than her dreams once had. Homes where people barely noticed her presence unless she left something slightly out of place. Her hands were cracked, not from weakness, but from repeated care wiping, scrubbing, polishing what was never hers. She had learned to be invisible, efficient, quiet, but not bitter, not quite. Every morning, Clara wrapped her hair, packed a sandwich, and carried two things in her bag: a small notebook with blank pages and a single phrase she once heard on a bus ride home: "Richness begins where resentment ends." She didn't fully understand it, but it echoed, so she kept it. Every time she cleaned a mirror, she looked into it just long enough to whisper, "There's more than this." And every time she left a place shinier than when she found it, she wrote something in her notebook. Not a to-do list, not complaints, but sentences that felt like seeds. "I'm not just a cleaner. I'm clearing space for my own future. Dust doesn't scare me. Some treasures are buried under it. Today, I gave my best. That best belongs to me first." No one saw those pages. They were for her. At night, she read them like prayers, even on days she didn't believe them. Especially on those days. She didn't own much, but in her mind, she began to create something new, a quiet shift, like moving furniture inside a house only she lived in. Her routines stayed the same, but her thoughts didn't. She started observing the homes she cleaned differently. Instead of envy, she studied what books were on their shelves, what quotes were on their walls, what habits echoed in their spaces. She noticed that wealthy homes often had light, plants, and written reminders, framed words like grateful, abundant, worthy. So she wrote them too, not for decoration, but for rewiring. She placed sticky notes in her tiny apartment, the mirror, the fridge, even inside her shoes. "Clara, you are not stuck. Clean space, clean energy. Money follows meaning." She still scrubbed tiles, still took the crowded bus, still lived on the edge of enough. But something inside her was shifting. She wasn't waiting for her reality to change to feel wealthy. She was practicing the feeling now. She smiled more, walked taller, and the world, as if noticing her for the first time, began to shift too subtly, slowly but surely. One afternoon, as she dusted the bookshelf of a client who never spoke more than a greeting, she found a book titled "The Mind as a Magnet." It was worn, underlined, and carried the smell of old thought. She asked if she could borrow it. The woman blinked, surprised, then nodded. Clara read it in 3 nights. Every page underlined something she had already started doing. Without knowing, it had a name: gratitude, intention, visualization, repetition. She didn't need proof anymore. She felt it, not in her bank account, but in her posture, in her language, in her presence. Something inside her was getting cleaner than any floor she had ever scrubbed. And she knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. She just didn't know yet how far it would go. Clara didn't expect miracles. She wasn't chasing luck or waiting for someone to rescue her. But she began to notice small shifts that didn't look like change until they did. A client who usually left without a word began offering tea after her shift. Another asked if she could help reorganize a shelf knot. Just clean it. It was the first time someone treated her like a person with a mind, not just hands. She didn't take it as a sign. She took it as a moment, and she honored it. Her confidence didn't explode, expanded, like sunlight crawling slowly across a tiled floor, claiming space gently. She started asking questions, not out loud, but in her thoughts. What would someone who believes in herself do right now? What does wealth feel like in the body? What if I already have everything I need to begin? The answers didn't come quickly, but the questions opened doors in her mind. One evening, she sat in her tiny kitchen, lit only by the orange hum of a street lamp outside, and wrote in her notebook, "I am no longer just cleaning space, I'm preparing. Rooms that I'll one day walk into as a guest, not a worker." The words felt bold, maybe too bold, but she let them stay. Days turned into weeks. She kept reading, kept whispering gratitude into rooms that weren't hers, kept treating herself like someone who mattered, even when the world forgot to. She stopped speaking poorly of money. She stopped saying, "I'm just a cleaner." She stopped apologizing for wanting more. Instead, she started saying things she didn't yet believe, just to see how they sounded in her mouth. "I receive with ease. My time is valuable. Wealth begins with how I treat myself." She started listening to audiobooks on the bus, not to escape her life, but to build a bridge between this version of herself and the one she hadn't met yet. She imagined that version of Clara, often not dressed in gold, not living in luxury, but laughing freely, sleeping deeply, choosing calmly. That Clara became her compass. One day, while cleaning the office of a woman who worked in real estate, Clara overheard a phone call. A property was available, small, damaged, overlooked, but in a growing area. The woman complained it wasn't worth her time. Clara asked gently, after the call ended, what would it take to buy a place like that? The woman raised an eyebrow. Honestly, not much. Just someone with vision and courage. Clara nodded, said thank you, and left. She didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of everything. She didn't buy the property the next day or the next month, but something had been planted. Not just an idea, but a doorway. And instead of saying, "It's not for me," Clara whispered to herself, "What if it could be?" From that day forward, she walked a little differently, as if something inside her had shifted from asking if to asking how. She still cleaned, still woke up early, still lived in a space too small. But now she carried something larger than circumstance, a belief that wouldn't let her shrink again, and that belief, though invisible, made everything else begin to glow. Clara had never borrowed money before, not from banks, not from people. She was raised on the belief that debt was danger, that asking was shameful, and that dreaming too far beyond your means was a kind of disrespect. But something inside her had grown louder than those beliefs. Not noisy, not reckless, just steady. She began asking quiet questions to people she once thought were untouchable. How did you get your first opportunity? What would you do if you had to start from zero? What do you know now that you wish you had known then? Most answered kindly. A few didn't, but even the silence taught her something. Then, one afternoon, a woman Clara had worked 4 years ago called out of nowhere. Her husband had passed, and she was downsizing. She remembered Clara's care, how she once rearranged an entire bookshelf just to make the titles easier to find. "I know it's small," the woman said, "but I have a place for sale. It's old, needs work, but I'd rather sell it to someone I trust than anyone else." Clara visited the apartment the next day. It was worn, dim, cracked tiles, a leaking faucet, but it had a window that faced the sunrise. And something in her heart whispered, "This is the one." She didn't have the money, not all of it, but she had saved quietly over the years, little by little, coin by coin, each one like a prayer folded in her wallet. It still wasn't enough, so she did what she had never done before. She asked, first her cousin, then a neighbor, then the woman who offered the place. "You believe in work," the woman said. "I believe in that." The agreement was simple, flexible, human. Clara cried when she signed the paper, not from fear, but from the weight of an old story finally cracking open. She owned something. Not just the apartment, but the decision, the courage, the shift. She moved in with just her mattress and her notebook. She cleaned the space slowly, lovingly, like planting a garden with her bare hands. She didn't rush to decorate. She wrote affirmations on the walls in pencil. "This is not small. This is sacred. I don't need more to feel worthy. Just need to remember, what I touch transforms." Within weeks, the space felt different. Not richer, not newer, just alive. She cooked simple meals with music playing, lit a candle every evening, planted basil in a chipped mug by the window. And one morning, as she looked around, she realized something that stopped her breath. She had already become the version of herself she used to dream of. Not because of the money, but because of how she walked, how she spoke to herself, how she carried presence into the room before anything else. And when people asked how she did it, how she went from cleaning other people's homes to owning her own, she would smile gently and say, "I cleaned more than floors. I cleared the space inside me where the old limits used to live." Clara didn't stop working after she bought the apartment. She could have, eventually. But something in her didn't want to walk away from what had shaped her. She just did it differently now. She cleaned with reverence, as if each surface she touched remembered who she had become. Her clients began to notice, not because she said more, but because she radiated something: quiet assurance, not arrogance, not ambition, just calm clarity. One of them asked, "Did something good happen to you?" Clara smiled and said, "I happened to myself." She no longer took every job that came her way. She chose the ones that felt aligned. She charged what she felt was fair, not just for the task, but for the energy she brought. Some walked away, others stayed. But now, she didn't shrink to be chosen. She stood where she was and waited for alignment to recognize her. And then, something surprising happened. A young girl in her building, barely 20, asked Clara if she could teach her how to clean like that. Clara didn't understand at first. Like what? The girl hesitated, like you're building something while you do it. That sentence lingered in Clara's mind for days. Like you're building something. She had never thought of her cleaning that way, but maybe that's what she had always done. She agreed. The girl started shadowing her, not just learning about products or motions, but about rhythm, presence, intention. Clara found herself teaching not just tasks, but truths. "Clean like you matter," she told her, "because the energy you leave behind carries your name, even when no one sees you." Word spread. One became 2, then 4, then 6. Young women, older women, even a quiet man who had worked nights for years. They didn't come for cleaning lessons. Not really. They came to be reminded that they were allowed to see their work as sacred. Clara began gathering them once a week. Not a business, just a circle. They talked about dreams, about pricing, about boundaries, about not saying yes just to be polite. Clara didn't have a logo, a name, or a big plan. But she had something rare: embodiment. She lived what she taught. Her old notebook now sat beside a new one, filled with phrases from others in the group. I'm not behind. I'm beginning. I charge for the energy I protect. My service is not small, it's a shift. Slowly, they began, working together, referring clients, sharing tools, trading time. One offered to design flyers. Another set up an account to receive payments online. They laughed at the idea of becoming a collective. But one day, someone asked if they were a company. Clara paused, then said softly, "We're a movement. Be just clean in the meantime." That evening, back in her little apartment, Clara lit a candle and stood in silence. She wasn't rich by the world's definition, but she felt overflowing. Her cup was no longer cracked, and the more she poured from it, the more it refilled itself, not with money, but with meaning. And that, she was learning, was the richest currency of all. Years later, someone invited Clara to speak, not in a stadium, not on television, but in a quiet room at a local school where a group of girls were learning about money, work, and dreams. She almost said no. She didn't feel like a teacher. But then she remembered the first time she heard someone say a sentence that changed her. Richness begins where resentment ends. If a stranger's words could root something in her heart, maybe hers could do the same. She arrived with nothing but her notebook and her story. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. How she once believed her value was tied to how small she could make herself. How she thought invisibility was survival. How she learned over time to listen to a different voice inside. And how wealth, for her, didn't start with money. It started the moment she decided to stop thinking like someone who was waiting to be saved. The girls listened, some with open eyes, others with folded arms, but she didn't try to impress them. She just told them what she wished someone had once told her. You are allowed to want more, and you don't need to explain why. When she finished, no one clapped right away. But one girl, maybe 14, walked up and whispered, I didn't know I was allowed to feel proud for helping my mom clean houses. I thought it was something to hide. Clara touched her hand and said, It's not what you do. It's how you walk into the room while doing it. After that, something settled in Clara, a soft knowing. She no longer felt like someone who had made it. She felt like someone who had remembered herself again and again. One morning, she woke up to find a package at her door. Inside was a handwritten card from one of the women in her group, now running her own cleaning business. Tucked into the envelope was a check for the mentorship I could never afford, but that you gave anyway, it said. Clara didn't cash it right away. She held it for a while, not because she doubted she deserved it, but because she wanted to absorb what it represented. A full circle return. Proof that what we give from a place of abundance always comes back. Not always quickly, not always from the direction we expect, but always. She cashed the check, used it to fix the window in her apartment, the one that faced the sunrise. And every morning she stood there in the light, tea in hand, whispering quietly to herself, This is wealth. This is wealth. This is wealth. Not the walls, not the number, not the applause, but the peace, the presence, the deep and unshakable truth that she had rewritten her story, one thought at a time. And that, quietly, patiently, invisibly, had changed everything. The letter that arrived too early, she never expected anything to arrive that day. It was the kind of day where the minutes blurred into each other, like soft clouds that forget where they begin. She had been folding laundry in silence, her thoughts tangled in the weight of everything unfinished. When the knock came, it didn't sound urgent. It was gentle, like someone remembering an old song. She opened the door to find no one there. Only a single envelope on the doorstep. No return address. Just her name, written in careful cursive, as if by someone who knew her well but hadn't spoken in years. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. It was too light to be important, too old-looking to be recent. She closed the door and sat down slowly. The house creaked around her, like it too was holding its breath. She opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, neatly folded and perfectly preserved. The ink wasn't smudged, but faded slightly at the edges, like time had touched it kindly. The first line read, "This letter is from your future, but not the future you think." She blinked. Not a prank. Not spam. The handwriting was familiar, painfully familiar. It looked like her own. Older, wiser, more patient. The letter went on to describe things she hadn't told anyone, fears buried deep, hopes she had abandoned quietly so they wouldn't be mourned. It spoke of moments that hadn't happened yet, but felt possible, and it carried a calmness that wrapped around her chest like a blanket. "You're going to forget what matters," it said at one point, "and then you'll remember. And that remembering will be your beginning." She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. The letter talked about a rainy Tuesday where she would almost give up. She hadn't reached that day yet. It warned her not to believe the silence when it tries to convince her she's alone. It whispered encouragement in a voice that was hers, but stronger. She kept reading. The letter didn't promise fame or fortune. It didn't tell her everything would be easy, but it did say you will matter in ways you can't yet see. And that was enough to crack something open. She read the last line 3 times before she could breathe again. Just because you haven't arrived doesn't mean you're lost. There was no signature, just a small heart drawn in the bottom corner. She turned the envelope over. Nothing. She placed the letter on the table like it was sacred. Her coffee had gone cold. Her laundry remained unfolded. But her chest felt different, as if someone had straightened a picture frame inside her. That evening, she went for a walk, not to go anywhere, but to let her steps catch up to the truth she'd just read. And as the sky turned to honey, she whispered thank you to no one and to everyone, to herself, to the future, to the letter that had arrived not when expected, but when needed. The letter rested quietly on the old wooden table, as if it had waited centuries to be opened. There was no stamp, no address, just her name written in a careful, patient script. When she opened it, the scent of ink and memory rose like something folded gently inside time. The first line made her pause. "You don't know me yet, but one day you'll thank me." Each sentence felt like someone had lived inside her silence. It spoke of nights she would cry without a sound, mornings when lifting her body would feel like lifting a mountain. Still, the letter insisted every hesitant step would lead to steady ground. It told her that her dreams would be mocked by many, including herself, that her ideas would seem too small against the weight of bills, of doubts, of the fast-moving world. But still it urged her to go on. The letter promised she would create something that would change lives even before it changed her own. That every loss was secretly shaping her. Every question she couldn't answer now would become a blessing later. Near the end, It said something no one had ever told her before. I trust you even before you trust yourself. And the letter was signed with a name she didn't yet recognize, her own years older. It felt like time had made a quiet detour to deliver this hope, as if the future had whispered back just in time to stop her from quitting. She placed the letter beneath her pillow, like someone hiding a secret map. That night, she dreamed of a path made of stars and ink. She walked on words she hadn't written yet, down roads that didn't exist but bent with each step of faith. In the dream, she was lighter, taller, as if she had realized that the sky was not a ceiling but a beginning. She woke before dawn, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the need to rush. She placed her feet on the ground with a quiet thank you, and instead of running into the noise of the day, she sat with a pen in her hand, not to write a reply to that letter, but to write a new one, a letter to another version of herself, maybe younger, maybe more tired, maybe someone on the edge of giving up. And in doing so, the cycle began again. Because when someone believes in themselves before the victory comes, they bend time. The letter that arrived too early was, in truth, the beginning of everything. And now, she too began to write letters that could travel through time toward hearts that didn't yet know they needed to be reached, because silent faith moves fast to wake what the world tries to keep asleep. And anyone who plants words of hope will one day harvest lighter futures, even if the harvest comes from a time not yet born. The man who turned raindrops into paths he never rushed when it rained. While others ran to close windows or cover their heads, he walked slowly, as if the water didn't bother him, as if every drop knew exactly where it was meant to land. People in the village whispered about him. Some said he had lost something in the rain long ago and was still looking for it. Others believed he could hear things the rest of them couldn't, things hidden in the rhythm of falling water. But none of them knew for sure, because he never explained. What they did see, however, was that every time he walked during the rain, something changed. Grass grew where his feet had passed. Flowers bloomed on soil that had been dry the day before. Puddles reflected dreams, not clouds. He carried nothing but a small satchel and a wooden staff, worn smooth by time. When asked where he was going, he'd simply say, "Where the rain takes me," and it always seemed to take him somewhere needed. A farm with tired soil, a school with silent children, a bridge that hadn't been crossed in years. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was like listening to a song you didn't know you remembered. One day, a boy followed him, quietly, barefoot, letting the water soak into his skin. He was curious, tired of feeling invisible. The man stopped, turned, and smiled without surprise. "Why are you following the rain?" he asked. The boy shrugged, unsure how to answer. The man crouched and traced a line in the mud with his finger. Every raindrop carves its own path, but some choose to carve together. From that day, the boy walked beside him. They never spoke of destination, only of moments. Like when a woman opened her window for the first time in years, just to let the sound of their footsteps in. Or when an old tree, long thought dead, bloomed a single flower as they passed. Word spread. People started leaving small cups by their doors, hoping to catch a drop of his magic. But he didn't stop at houses that waited. He stopped at places forgotten, places too tired to hope. That's where the rain led him. That's where his footsteps meant more. One evening, as the sky turned the color of pewter and the world seemed hushed, he stood still under a willow tree. The boy, now taller, with eyes full of questions, asked, "Do you ever get tired?" The man looked up at the heavy clouds and said, "Only when I try to walk dry." The boy didn't understand then, not fully, but he remembered the words. Years later, he would say them to someone else, someone just beginning to search for meaning in the mess, because that's what the man had taught him, not with rules or maps, but with quiet consistency. That even in storms, you can move with grace. That some of the most powerful journeys begin when you stop running from the rain. And that maybe, just maybe, the path was never meant to be dry. One night, the rain didn't come. The sky remained still, stretched in shades of quiet gray, and the world beneath it held its breath. The man sat outside his small shelter, listening to a silence so deep it echoed. The boy, now a young man, sat beside him, unsure what the absence meant. "Is the rain angry?" he asked softly. The man shook his head. "No, it's listening. Sometimes even the rain needs to rest." They didn't move for hours, just watched the stillness like it was alive. That night, something changed. When they rose the next morning, the earth beneath them was damped, not flooded, just quietly fed. The boy touched the soil. "It rained while we slept," the man smiled. "Or maybe we dreamed loud enough for the rain to hear." That day, they reached a village on the edge of forgetting. The buildings leaned with fatigue, and the faces they met held more years than hope. Yet, as they stepped through the town, nothing extraordinary happened. No blooms, no puddles of wonder, just dust and eyes too tired to lift. The boy frowned, expecting something. The man placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not every place wants to bloom. Some just want to be remembered." So they stayed for days. No walking, no wandering, just presence. They helped fix roofs, shared stories, listened. And one morning, as the first light hit the windows, a girl left a cup of water on a doorstep, not expecting magic, just offering. The next day, more cups appeared, some with drawings, others with notes. And the boy realized maybe the rain hadn't stopped. Maybe it had entered them, one drop at a time. Years passed. The man's steps slowed, but never stopped. The boy, now called the rainwalker, by some continued his journey alone, though never truly alone. Because with every path he walked, every soul he met, he carried those first lessons like seeds in his pocket. That silence can speak. That waiting is a form of courage. And that sometimes, when you give up looking for the path, you become it. Villages began to leave trails of lanterns on stormy nights, hoping he'd pass by. Letters appeared on fences, thanking a man they'd never met, but whose story had reached them like whispers on wind. And in a city of glass and noise, where rain was a nuisance and paths were made of metal, a woman stood still one morning, letting the water soak her. People stared. Some laughed. But one child reached for her hand and asked, "Are you waiting for the rainwalker?" She looked down, surprised, then smiled. "No," she whispered, "but I think he's already here." Somewhere, far from crowds, under a sky just beginning to cry, the man stood again by a river, his staff planted in the earth, his face turned toward the clouds. He wasn't waiting. he wasn't seeking. He was simply being. And the rain, gentle as memory, began to fall. Not to drench, not to cleanse, but to reveal the path he had always known was there. The one not made of stone or map, but of steps taken with kindness, choices shaped by silence, and the understanding that you don't have to chase the storm to find your purpose. You only have to walk with it, and in doing so, you turn even the softest raindrops into a path no one can erase.